Hi, welcome to this short webinar on getting data from your finance and budget systems, reporting and analysing it, both for actuals and for budget and forecast. If you've attended this sort of webinar before, then you'll know there's typically a 10-minute PowerPoint by a sales guy pointing out all the pains that you already know you have, how beautiful their solution is and how successful they've been with other customers. I don't intend to do that. All that information is already available at LucaNet.HAYNE.co. And that's typically followed by a 40-minute features demo by a technical consultant. Today is different. I'm the sales guy at HAYNE Solutions for LucaNet. LucaNet, if you're not already aware of it, is German software and already has 1,700 customers globally. And HAYNE has 22 consultants, part and fully qualified, based in Stratford-upon-Avon. Again, for more information, please visit lucanet.hayne.co. I'll be doing the demo myself. I'm not an accountant, I'm not a consultant, and I have only had 2 days formal training from LucaNet. But that's the unique selling point of LucaNet. We'll train you very quickly so you can implement the solution yourself with almost no expensive consulting, doing the implementation for you, that you then have to call back in to make changes. But LucaNet is a fully functional consolidation and budgeting, planning and forecasting application, and we're only going to scratch the surface of its capabilities today to look at reporting. To see more of the functionality, please visit the HAYNE Solutions YouTube channel for more of my videos. What I will be going through today is generating your financial reports in a minute or less per report, inputting your data for actuals and budget and reporting on those, and reporting actuals versus budget, showing you KPIs within the system, also covering non-financial data, looking at multi-currency and workflow to cover the monthly close process. You'll probably notice that the demonstration is pre-recorded. That's because despite many attempts I haven't managed to press all the buttons in the right order for a full half hour, so my apologies for that. So let's have a look at the kind of period reporting that you're probably doing. This is an Excel report, obviously, with the profit and loss, the balance sheet, fixed assets, could be cash flow, and a number of charts within it. You see that this is for the holding company, and I guess you're producing these on a regular basis, at least monthly, if not more frequently, and for a range of business units within your group, and maybe even cost centres. We know this because recent surveys still describe that over 65% of finance functions are delivering period reporting this way. Now this report has actually been delivered straight out of LucaNet. So let's have a quick look at how that's done. On the screen you're looking at a workflow for a typical monthly close where we go through the various steps, some of which we'll cover later in the webinar. But for the moment let's just go to the end and have a look at the management report. The management report we can produce for any element within the organisation. I think the previous one was holding, so we'll do the group one. We can report in any of the currencies that are used by that particular element, and we can report for any period within the actuals or budget data, depending which data level we're using. And all we have to do then is to generate the report. Now I promise you these reports would take a minute or less, and I think you'll agree that was less than a minute. All of these numbers are static, and the text is text, static text, which means that we can just cut and paste this report once it's produced, and we could paste it, for example, into the previous report. So we now have the profit and loss for the group and the profit and loss for the holding. Now all of this data, as I say, is static, it's pure Excel, so there's no need for a LucaNet license to distribute this as broadly as you'd like within your organisation. We can also have a dynamic data link between Excel and LucaNet. For example, if we use this report here called Consolidated Report, then it fires up an Excel which has a link to LucaNet. We need to log in using the add-in for LucaNet. And now we can create a report by selecting parameters within the report itself. I'm going to choose the holding company, September 2014, and this company reports in euros. Press Ctrl Q will send the query off to LucaNet, bring the data back into the P&L tab, and we can see that for September 2014 the revenues were 2,962,903. If we go back to LucaNet and look at the P&L in LucaNet itself for the same holding company actuals, and let's find September, then you see the figure is 2,962,902.77, so it's just rounded up to no decimal places in the Excel report. We'll see that October 14 in LucaNet is empty, and if we go to Consolidated Report and run that again, but this time for October rather than September, and refresh, again look at the P&L tab, then we'll see October is empty. So what we'll do is we'll load the data for October. The easiest way to import the October data into holding is to follow the monthly close protocol that we've seen earlier. This lists all the steps involved in bringing the data in for the monthly close, consolidating it, and then producing the reporting with checks and balances at the end of the process. It also shows who's responsible for completing that action, who's responsible for observing it and making sure it's actually done, the date that it's due, and a Gantt chart to show all the various steps within the process. Obviously, this being a demonstration system, we're well out of date. This is all meant to have been done by September 2015. By each of these items there can be a complete description of how that task is to be done. For example, in this one, step 1 is to show that October is empty in the P&L. And you can embed a link to take you straight to that part of the process. So this is just showing the P&L for holding for October actuals to show you that it's empty. We have a back button to take us straight back to where we came from. And obviously I'm going to import the trial balance. And to do that you would go to importing data into accounting areas. We have a link here to take us to that area where we'd actually do the data import. I'll leave that for just a moment and we'll come back to it in a sec, because I just want to carry on with the documentation, because this is where the user will document their processes. You can see that we also embed graphics, so you can embed the screens that we're going to see when we get to that step in the process, and you can even output this in PDFs. To make a manual for the system. I'd emphasize that this is typically done by the customer documenting their own system that they've typically implemented for themselves. So again, it's not a consulting activity. If we compare this importing the holding trial balance to importing the China trial balance that hasn't been documented, then you can see there's a world of difference. Someone can easily follow the holding process, but not the China process. I'll just show you briefly how easy it is to put something in there. We just double click to take it into edit mode, and let's say this is the China TB import process. And the first step, let's say, is to go to importing data, and let's go and get the link for that. So if we manually navigate over to that area, we can copy a link, go back to the documentation, and paste that link in. I save that. Now when somebody has to do that part of the process, they can just click on that link when they can see it, and it will take them straight to the data imports for China. Okay, we're here. Let's crack on with importing the data for the holding part of the organization. To do that, we simply right-click, New, Data Import. We'll give it a name, sticking to the convention, 2014, then the period, and business unit. The data source is the trial balance for holding. So these data sources have been defined by the customer in their system, and we have a mapping table that's going to map the nominal accounts into the general ledger. If we click on importing, then LucaNet asks us to specify the business unit or accounting area, as LucaNet calls them. We've just got one of these, but there could be a list. We're looking for 2014 year and period 10. So you can see that with this process we could import data for any period. If we start that process, then LucaNet is parsing that data to make sure it can understand it, and then we can continue with the process. It says there are a couple of missing assignments, a couple of nominal accounts that it doesn't recognize, and an accounting area or cost center that it doesn't recognize as well. So let's go and have a look at those. So we've got two nominal accounts, Subcontracted Expenditure and Fuel Cost. So what I'm demonstrating is simply that you can sort these out on the fly as you're bringing the data in. So if a business unit has some nominal accounts that you're not familiar with, or are not quite called the same as you have in the GL, then you can sort them out while you're actually importing the data, rather than having to go back to a separate environment. So the subcontracted expenditure, I think, would have to go on costs of goods sold. Probably purchase services. We use the chevron with a plus on to add it to the existing systems items. The chevron with a blob on it says that if LucaNet can find a match, then it will assign it automatically. And fuel cost is going to be on other operating expenses, motor vehicle costs. So we select it and motor vehicle costs and add it to that nominal account in the GL. So I'm just showing how easy it is to assign these things while you're bringing the data in. We've also got an accounting area that it doesn't understand. It's called Holding Prod 4. So let's see where in the organisation that might fit. We're looking at holding. It sounds like it's a production thing. We can see a production 1, 2 and 3, so it makes sense that there's a production 4. So we can select production and add prod 4. We can see a calculation which is a total of production 1, 2 and 3. So presumably prod 4 should be part of that calculation. If we just right click on production, we can define the order and move prod 4 up so it gets included in the calculation. It's named slightly differently. We can sort that out by selecting the properties for it, just naming it in a similar convention to the others. Okay, looks like we've sorted out all the assignments and we can carry on. Okay. and then we can save the data, and LucaNet will actually load the data into the P&L. We can go back to the P&L for October, and we can see that holding now all the data for October has been loaded. If we go back to the consolidated Excel report and Control Q to refresh the data, and then go to the P&L tab, then we see that the data for October has now flowed through into this report. If we look at the purchase services, it's 399,806. Remember, we added in subcontract expenditure. And if we go back to LucaNet, then we can see that purchase services is the same at 399,805. So even though we've brought in a new nominal account, subcontracted expenditure, at 39,980, that has got rolled up because it's been automatically calculated within LucaNet, and the Excel report is reporting at the cost of purchase services level, so it has been included in that total. So we've seen that we can have a linked report with dynamic data, but within LucaNet it can be more dynamic than that. For example, if we look here in general and administrative expenses, we have two items for travel expenses, billable and not billable, which are heavy amounts, and somebody might want to separate those out so they can keep a closer eye on them. To do that, all we'd have to do is to right click, new item, and call it travel, for example. And then we could take those two items, cut them out of G&A, and put them into travel. Of course, we're immediately reporting that line item separately from G&A now within LucaNet itself. But if we looked in the Excel, linked Excel dynamic data report, we'll see that the 143,000 appears. What we won't see is the 97,000 has been cut out of the structure. So let's just go and have a look at that. So if we just refresh, and then we drill down into operating expenses, general administration now is 143,238. But we've lost the line item. We don't have the line items being created for travel. And the point is that LucaNet is more dynamic because you can change structure on the fly. So really the best place to be analysing and reporting your data is within LucaNet itself. If we're going to report within LucaNet, then some of the possibilities we have are, for example, a management cockpit, where the management could have numbers that they particularly want to keep an eye on. I think we've just decided that travel expense is something we want to keep an eye on, so we could add that here. So just a new item for travel. And then we could add those travel items here. So new formula, travel billable. And travel non-billable. Okay, we just added those key performance indicators or key line items to the management cockpit so they can be seen as often as they want to. Up here we've created a kind of reporting pack for the management. So this is a grid of the management cockpit that you've just seen, the P&L, the balance sheet and the cash flow across each of the periods, And all I have to do to see, for example, the P&L for that particular period, June, is to click on this, and it's all set up. June 14, holding company in euros, actual budget, percentage difference. Within that report pack as well, we were showing non-financial reporting, so sales analysis, for example. We could have, again, look at June, and we can see sales from the P&L by the regions, by customers, by products, etc. And we've even got HR reporting. So we're looking at number of employees, employees by contract, working days, etc. So all of this is available to be set up within LucaNet, and gives you comprehensive flexibility in reporting within the product itself. Okay, so we've covered importing and reporting actuals, but what about the budget? If you remember, we imported a new revenue number for a new cost center called Production 4 for October 2014. So if we just navigate to October, we imported this actuals number, 555,556, but there is no budget number, so there's no variance. So we need to ask that business unit for their budget. And they're probably doing it in Excel, which is probably more complex than the one I've put together. But I'll show you my very skeletal budget template. So here we're budgeting for product 4 based on its average price of 6,500 multiplied by its volumes in October, November and December, which gives us these totals in euros. In the LucaNet tab we have a simple import table with the keyword posting date and the period's dates in row 1, and the keyword account indicating the cost center these numbers should end up in. Then the nominal account number and description, and then the actual data referenced from the other tab. You can tell I'm not an accountant because I had to balance the revenue off by accounts receivable trade, though one of my videos shows you how to apply cash flow rules to your revenue. We bring the budget data in exactly the same way as we brought actuals data in, by going to importing data into accounting areas, selecting holding, right click, new data import 2014 Q4, holding budget, revenue, prod 4. We get that data from the holding budget and use the standard mapping table. Now this is the only difference from importing actuals. We don't bring it into the actuals data level, we select a budget data level. You can see that you can have multiple versions of budgets and forecasts. They're just different data levels in LucaNet. It's still imported data, it hasn't been adjusted, and we select the Excel file you saw a moment ago. Press start and LucaNet parses that file to make sure it can read it properly. Then when I click on save, it gets loaded into the P&L. So if we go back to the P&L, then for production 4 we have the actuals 555,556 and the budget 552,500 with a very neat and tidy 1% positive variance. So you can carry on budgeting and forecasting in Excel, and we can import it into LucaNet. But why do that? Let's take those Excel numbers out again. With the right privileges, I'm an administrator, you can simply go back to importing data into accounting areas and you can delete that import. All of this activity is tracked in an audit log, so you can see exactly who did what and when, where data came from and where it went to. And if we go back to the P&L, you'll see that the budget number has now disappeared. I've done that because we can do the planning directly in LucaNet. If I just double click on that number, then we can create a posting using a form. I'm using a quantity times price form, but it could be subject to a different figure, so you could read in the revenue and take a percentage off into taxation. Lots of different methods. If we click OK, we'll get the result of the calculation in the bottom row, so I need to tell LucaNet where to post that result. If I double click in here, then I can select the revenue third party account directly from the P&L. You'll see that Jan, Feb, March, etc. are greyed out. This is because they're closed and you can't write data to them. If we just enter the quantity in October and November and December, and the average price, then OK, LucaNet loads the results into the P&L. Provided I'm on the right data level. So the 552,500 appears from that form. If I click on it, then I can see the posting, and I can see the form and the numbers. So you can do your planning within LucaNet without Excel. This is a very simple example, but it could be much more complex. So hopefully I've covered everything that was on the agenda, producing your reports in a minute or less for actuals and budget, and actual versus budget, showed you KPIs, non-financial data such as the HR numbers, multi-currency and workflow process to control the monthly close. As I've mentioned, a lot of the functionality in LucaNet I have already created videos for, so please visit the HAYNE Solutions YouTube channel. If I haven't covered something, or if you want further clarification, then please type your questions into the question or chat box in the webinar, or raise your hand and we can open the line so you can ask us directly. Or if you think of it later, then please mail me at rick.davies@hayne.co.